All right. Good morning, everyone. Paul Tranny here, diving into Photoshop Masterclass. We're going to tackle lighting, which is super important. So I want to welcome everyone. And I see you, Eric, Angelique, Noor, Colby. Colby, I hear you're going to be a guest with us, which is fantastic. I think that's next week. So, yes, thank you so much for joining me. If you're if you're joining me on YouTube, go over to behance.net/live. It'll be appreciated. Either way, I'm going to dive into this. Awesome. That's my goal, is to make things look easy. Hopefully that sounds good to you, Jason Rose. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of share with you what we're going to cover, right? And this is going to be the fundamentals for a lot of things. So starting with the fundamentals of lighting, and then we'll dive into some fun lighting effects, and we'll get pretty intense with it as well. So hopefully that works for you, Ang and Akansha. Ouch, it's hard to say. Either way, we're going to deal with ambient lighting, beam lights, light rays, basically, using lens flares, various lighting effects that are kind of built in, and then really start to stack all these various effects one on top of the next, using shapes, adjustment layers, masks, blend modes, all sorts of crazy things. So, without further ado, I kind of want to show you what I have going on. So let me share my screen with you. Again, keep the conversation going. Here I am in Photoshop, and again, do this every week. You can see sort of this sort of like fun lighting effects, right? Where you have this glow, these neon glows, which I've kind of talked a little bit about before, but like, how would you put this together? Same thing for this one. This is probably the one we'll tackle, right? Sort of adding these glows and lighting, even taking something, that's seemingly boring, if you ask me, and, adding some fun lighting. So this is what I'm working on now as well. I want to add a ghost in this attic, right? So I only want him highlighted by the light. So it's like a little, I don't know, what do you call that little, there's a term for it, but, a ghostly type of, person hanging out right there, right? That's what I'm going to cover. I could talk about simple lighting as well. We have this, and I'll kind of dive into this. Let me just copy this. Actually, no, let's leave this the way it is. I want to kind of cover some simple lighting effects that you can tackle. So I'm actually going to rotate this image clockwise, because I want to kind of tackle some simple things that we can do. Say, for instance, if you just want to brighten an image, you probably know that you need to convert it to a smart object. Since this is a master class, I'm not really going to dive much into this. Converting it to a smart object, and then we would start to use some adjustment layers. Okay, we know about these, right? We can go into levels. By the way, these are all broken down into dealing with brightness and color. So brightness and contrast, not dealing with color. This is where we get into color, and these are sort of special effects. Okay, so that's how all these are broken down. I would go into levels, for instance. If you ever want an easy button, it's probably going to be this auto button right here. Just click auto, right? And see it kind of brighten up, and we can adjust it further from there, right? You get it. You know how that works. But I'm going to do some more fun things with this as well. So again, overall image adjustment, just like that, as we're adding right in here. And I'm just going to type in some text. There we go. Typed in a name. Hopefully this works. Desiree, just to show that this is live. And thank you so much for joining me. Typing in some text. I'm going to get into just a couple things real fast. Okay, first off, I'm going to definitely change the font. For those of you who know me, know what font I'm going to pick. Guess what font? It's going to be Lust Script Display, right? So there we are, because again, I just like the little alternates and things like that we have right in there. So you get the idea. Let's try Daniela, Daniela. Taking this L. There we go, because I wanted a kind of curly thing like that. Let's say I wanted to add some lighting to this. I want to show you this really fast. Let me select a neutral color, filling this really fast with foreground. I want to give this type 3D effect. I can make this type 3D. I can add that lighting using 3D, but I'm actually going to show you some of the, again, this first example is all about quick results, fast. These two I would get into. I'm also going to get into clouds, but I want to dive into lighting effects. I don't know if you've ever used this. Selecting lighting effects. Wait for it, wait for it. And this is what we get with our lighting effects, right? This has been in Photoshop for, I feel like 2 decades, right? But you can see what I can do in here. I bet you didn't know that we actually have added these new controls. So it's not as clunky as it used to be. So we make these updates and then I feel like we don't tell people. But look at this. Look at how awesome this is. Coming in here, adjusting this brightness like that. And now I have obviously an easy lighting effect, right? That's what I want. Notice that I'm dealing with the spot light, right? We can make this a point light. Obviously not as exciting, but you can see it's a point light going straight down. And then we have these infinite lights. But probably your best bet, by the way, this is the infinite light. Looks a lot like a 3D, the 3D module. Let me grab this. You know, but chances are you're going to want to use sort of the spotlight's probably the one that you're going to have the most fun with. Taking that like so, making it larger, you get the idea. And hopefully this is new to some people because, again, we can take this and we can have some fun with it. Clicking OK. There it is. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to undo this really fast. I'm going to convert this to a smart object. And I'm going to apply that lighting effect again. Clicking OK. Wait for it. And there we are. I did not convert that to a smart object first, but now I have my lighting effects that can easily be changed. So from there, I can say, hey, you know what? Let's just put it inside of that text, Daniela, if I want to. And now I have some lighting effects on her. Or I can actually pull that off and apply it to the background image. Right, so there it is right there. Wait for it. Let's expand this out. Wait for it. Taking this into something like, say, overlay. And again, I'm starting simply, and then I can get more complex here in a second as well. But this is actually just using lighting effects as a filter, by the way. And there you have that, right? So again, I'm not crazy about that gray, to be honest with you. Kind of lacks personality, right? So chances are you want to probably like colorize it and do some fun stuff like that. So again, that's all I wanted to cover is that lighting effects in there. I'll throw another one on here in a second. Sorry, I have to change the color of that text. I have to do something. Something needs to change, right? Let's give it a little bit of something like that. I don't know. I'm working on it. Just could be a little better. There we go. That works for me. Done and done. Quick lighting. Obviously, I can add a drop shadow and all that fun stuff. The key thing you need to remember is right in here. Render effects, it's lighting effects right there. Okay, so the next one we want to work on, again, I'm starting with the simple things. Yes, Valentine says it's super cool. That's great to hear because, yeah, I think we've updated some of these effects and filters. And if you weren't joining me today, how are you to know? Yeah, Sam, they added all those handles and all that stuff. Sweet. All right, so next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just cover the next one. It's really fast. Foreground color. If I wanted to get really specific, I can track where the cursor is and coordinate that with my lens flare, but I'm just making a black layer. I'm going to go into render and I'm going to select lens flare, right? Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is a master class and I don't feel like this is quite master classy enough, right? You have all these different lenses as well. Chances are you're probably going to use the first one because you're going to want to splash a color, right? Obviously, I can control the brightness and then also we get the precise flare center. So what you can do is you can find a specific spot on your canvas. So that's where I want the lens flare to appear. And if you hold down the Alt key, you can click, and then you can punch those numbers right in there and set that flare center to exactly where you want to put it, right? So that's one way of doing things. I typically just put it in the general direction, right? And then I change the blend mode right down here, changing that to lighten in this case, right? So lighten or screen will sometimes work, but obviously there you get that highlight, and you can kind of move that wherever you want to give it a splash of color. Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that. So again, lens flare, always, anytime I use a lens flare, it's just like it looks fake. So you got to really just use this with some caution, I guess, right? I would actually push this off to the side because it adds a nice little bokeh effect to this in this case, right? So far, so good. Probably adjust that a little bit. Probably do some other things to make this a little bit more interesting. Right? But let's move on from there. Okay, we have that done. We will save this file as Daniela. Thank you for joining me today. And let's move on to some more advanced lighting effects, if I could. Okay, so that was easy enough. Let's go into some of the statue stuff. What about these neon glows? We see these, like, I feel like I've been seeing a lot of these lately. And I think the color combo is why we like adding these neon effects. Okay, so that's what I want to do, something like this, right? So essentially, this is my original, okay? And I want to start to add some things to it. Shall we do that? Let's just jump in here and make it happen. There's so many things that I want to... so many things I could try to add. I'm going to go into Custom Shape Tool. We have our custom shapes right in here. I could select a sphere in this case if I want to, or any shape. But basically, I'm just selecting a shape, and I'm going to just drag it out and make our rectangle. From here, we're going to change the color to our fun neon, like so. And I'm going to do some other things really fast. Change that to black and white. There we go. Boom, boom. I'm going to convert this to a smart object. The reason I'm lucky to have you here, Yao. Hopefully that's okay. So I always convert anytime before I start to transform and distort things, I convert it to a smart object. Okay. Now when I do Command T and start rotating, in fact, I'll do a right click. Because even while you do the Command T, you can do a right click and say, hey, no, I want to distort, right? And yes, that can be a shortcut key as well. Command 0 will bring everything into perspective, even if this is off. But now I can kind of start to angle that the way I want, because I want it to kind of wrap around his head like so, okay? But the cool thing is, if I do Command T again, look, I actually get my controls in perspective. It doesn't do it at 90-degree angles anymore. So, hello, Steve from Wellington, New Zealand. Good to have you here. Sorry about that. Let me turn it down. Thank you so much. Let me know if my mic's too hot. I do see it is in the red a little bit, and I apologize. I just get excited. And I did move it up a little bit from how high it usually is. I have the cheapest mic stand ever. Okay, so hopefully that's a little better. Sorry about that. So annoying. But this should be better now. Let's dive into this. Hitting enter, and now I can add some fun things to this. Okay. So from here, I could do a couple things. We want to add a glow. We can double click. And of course, right in here, we're going to have oh, this is perplexing. Interesting. Oh, there it is. Here's outer glow. Sorry, I couldn't find it for a second. outer glow, right? Adding the outer glow, you know what it's going to do. It's going to be very procedural now, right? So it's going to be very straightforward. It's going to do the same amount all the way around, okay? And typically I'd sort of want to scale that down some, like so. Okay, from there, click OK. I can start to play with this some more, because what I end up doing a lot is adjusting this glow around him. So this is what I'll end up doing is I will come in here and I will like rasterize the layer style. I know that's a horrible word, but I want to rasterize the layer style. Oops. Maybe I don't want to do that. Let's bring it back. Anyways, I might just keep this like it is right now. I'm just gonna go to work, right? This is what I usually do. Double click, adding one in front, one behind. The one behind is of course gonna be only exist right here. Painting that one in behind his head, and this one is going to be in front, right? Painting X will flip those two colors, and then I can remove this one right here. I don't know if you do this a lot, but we know that the brackets will increase or decrease the brush sizes. If you hold down the Shift key, it'll give it a hard edge or a soft edge. So hold down the Shift key and that will adjust that accordingly. Because I notice right here, I want that to be nice and soft. So I just kind of wanted that to wrap around. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. Diving into this a little further. Taking this, let's rasterize layer. Rasterize layer style. There, good. Let's blur this. This is typically what I will do is I'll actually grab a brush, create a new layer, sample that color, and then start painting on this image. So right in here, start painting on it like so. Painting on this shoulder, right? Everywhere where that light's gonna hit, right? It's gonna hit in the front right here, taking that around like so, okay? So everywhere where that light will hit is where I will paint. Okay, it's typically gonna be around the edges. Notice that all you need to do is make this a clipping mask, just like so, and now it's gonna be clipped to, instead of being like so, it's gonna be clipped to it, and then you just adjust the layer blend mode. Okay, so going through these, I could tell you already darken would work, multiply would work. It's going to be these darker colors initially. So these are the darker blend modes, and then it gets into the lighter ones, which are the ones that are just a little more hot, right? So we have lighten, screen, color dodge, things like that. And then we get into these two, which is overlay. Cool thing is I could change that at any time. I can even just put this on overlay and continue to paint, right? And add those highlights down his arm like so, right? Kind of like that. And let's kind of move him up, by the way. I want to keep this a little bit PC. Let's cover him up a little bit. There we go. Let's move that back down. There we go. Let's make this a little bit more modest stream. I apologize. Don't mean to offend anyone. But I'm just painting with that color right there. If I adjust the flow, I want to take the flow of this color down. So it's just going to paint really light and then slowly build up as I paint more, right? It slowly starts to build up and add that splash of light right in there. All right, so that's typically what I'd want to do to add this color right in here. There's more we can do as well. Okay, so a lot of times we want to play with brightness and contrast, and what we can do is we could do the same thing with a layer. I might need to show that with the other example, but I want to show you kind of painting with layer adjustment layers. Right, so there's that one. I would do another shape with a different color. maybe going the other direction. Same process. You don't need me to walk through all this. Command T, just, you know, move that up, right click, access the distort features and kind of have this wrap around maybe a different direction. And I can do the same thing, but I'd want to just add 2 different splashes of light for this, and it's all done the same way. Outer glow, you get the idea. I want to move on to my other piece though as well, because I have more tips to show you. You know, these are fun ones, by the way, as I take a look at this. Oh, Eric, you were too kind. But this is the idea, you know, maybe it goes in front, maybe it goes in back. I'd start to play with all these different little angles, and I'd have these start to intersect and intertwine and all that stuff. And it comes just with layering, right? So it's going to mean, in fact, I feel like I might need to darken that color a little bit. But let's go ahead and duplicate this one, Command J, or just drag it down. Layer mask, B for brush, closing bracket to increase the size, increase the flow as well is what I'm doing. And I can start to get rid of that piece right there. Wait for it. Starting to get rid of it like that. Let's move that. Let's get rid of this part. I'm erasing. You can see it start to melt away, but that's how these lights actually look. Cool. Turn on that one. We can bring this one to the back, kind of like so. You get the idea. We can start to add all those colors like we did before, and let's move on to our other piece. But you can start to see how fun this gets after a while. To get the eyedropper, select your color, B for brush, come back in here and start adding that second splash of color wherever you think you need it, right? Maybe want it to be on this side, right? I'm taking some artistic liberties with this as well. And then, of course, change or adjust the layer blend mode. Ooh, that looks nice. Overlay, that works. You get the idea. Cool. All right, so let's move on. It's 2 examples so far. I want to get into a third. Hopefully you like that. I could show you the final, by the way. If we take a look. And you can see how the final's put together in a similar fashion. We've gone through a ton of things, by the way. Just too many to even think of right now. But what I want to do is I want to get into some more advanced things. But you can see these are all kind of done the same way. Look at this. Turning this on. We have a couple extra little features that are done in here, which I want to cover. Okay, because we have right in here. This is sort of this is his body. And there's that glow. We know how to add this glow. But what's also happening here is a lot of adjustment layers. And painting on those layer masks to get that effect that we want. So that's what's happening here, right? Overall, what's happening? Adjust all the levels, adding some brightness, contrast, some hue and saturation. And then this top one, and this is the one I'll cover again, so we're on the same page. I'm going to delete this, or maybe I'll turn this off. You ready for this? Rather than painting with color, what we want to do is we might want to bring we might want to use a layer mask, and you might want to do this, a layer mask on an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to hue saturation. I'm going to colorize this, right? We'll crank this up. It's going to be our nice teal color, right? And let's just invert that, right? So now what I can do is I can hit Command B and start to paint. And I'm just going to paint right down here, by the way, because it's just this layer. And I'm actually painting with that adjustment layer. Why would we want to do this? Well, we'd want to do this because we might want to change the color later on, right? If I don't think this color is right, in fact, look how it looks a little green. Whoop, sorry. Zoomed in way too close. But notice how it looks a little green? I can shift that back to a different color, whatever the case may be. So I have all these this flexibility with an adjustment layer to get this the way I want it to. All right. And kind of turning on the final, I have a couple more things that are going on. In fact, let me open up one more example that I have of this neon technique is this one. So you ready for this, Steve? Yeah, Steve, that's a great idea. We could do that. We could easily make this come to life with animation, which is a great idea. Want to know what's happening here? So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm kind of trying to make a 3D effect anytime I bend these lines. But what if I actually just make this 3D? And that's exactly what's happening right in here. So let's just turn off some of these items and get this isolated. Right here to this shape. This shape is actually a 3D layer. So check this out. 3D. Here's the shape, but let me adjust the current view just so you can see I can bend this around her and put it in a different perspective. Okay. Cool. Hopefully everything is good so far. And let me just double check. Okay, so yeah. I guess this live stream might depend on your internet connection. But look at that. Look at this. This is actually 3D in Photoshop. How is this done? Well, it was done quite simply by using a shape like we were doing before. In this case, let's go with a circle. Here's my circle. It's going to be our fancy pink. And then from this pink, I can make a 3D extrusion. And then I want to change the color of this and all that stuff. I've already talked about 3D before, so that's why I don't want to get into this too much. But obviously, I actually want to change these materials as well. There's this front inflation material. There's the bevel material, right? I want to change this all to neon, right? Extrusion material. Watch, you ready? I'm going to change this to neon. And then let's take the extrusion down some as well. But that's all I've done, taking the extrusion down to something nice and thin, and then just manipulating this in 3D space like so. Maybe grabbing my shape and rotating it around accordingly as I'm doing right now. Right? So that's how I've created this 3D like neon ring. You get the idea. Sometimes these little nodes are hard to grab. Well, you can always use the properties panel and adjust accordingly right in here as well. Okay, so and again, I can just drag zoop, right there. And then it's a matter of eliminating what you don't need to end up with what you do need. And there's that. So cool. All right, so yeah, sorry it's not working for you, Abby, but you get the idea. This is being recorded, by the way, so even if you have a slow internet connection, you can also watch this later. And again, you can see the final. Let's go ahead and let's start from scratch because I want to get into just some general lighting effects, some lighting rays as well. So let's do that. Let's go over to this attic where we have this freaky guy, right? We have a window. This is a seemingly boring image. You would be correct in thinking it is. You are right. I'll just jump in here, use the pen tool and white, boom, 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 something like that. There's my shape, converting it to a smart object. Command T, right click, distort, and now I can kind of distort this into place and make it look like lighting is coming from this window right over here, right? I'll probably do a couple different things here, but let's just kind of get this roughly in place, right? We get it. We get how this works. Zoop, zoop. Something like that. Okay, we could always change this later because it's a smart object. Hitting OK. And, I could play with the blend modes, right? We've kind of already talked about that. I can change this to overlay. Overlay already kind of gives it a cool look, or even soft light. Gets it to a pretty good location and look overall. But I want to go into into blur, Gaussian blur, give it a little bit of a blur. But it's more than just giving these edges a blur. In fact, I don't even want to do this. I want to hit cancel rather than going with Gaussian blur. In fact, you know what? I'm going to just change this back to normal so we can all see it a little better. We know these light rays are going to be more crisp on this side and then blurrier on this end. So we want to go into filter, blur gallery, and do something like tilt shift. I think iris blur would work as well, right? I'm going to try iris blur. Let's do it. Let's crank it up. Yep, iris blur will work as well. The main point is I want to have right down here, this is where it's going to be maybe a little more crisp. And then it's going to blur out the further away this is. See what's happening there? We're creating that nice, blur effect as we adjust this range. Even if I grab this middle node, this is where the magic happens. Have it start there and have it really trail out and just spill into that room like so, okay? That's what I'm doing with the iris blur. You can see it right up here. Again, tilt shift will do the same thing. Just so you know, I'm making like light rays coming from the window. So that's what I'm working on, lighting effects, light rays coming from this window. We're just doing one big one. I did show you earlier the lighting effects filter, so it's kind of like we're making our own lighting effect, kind of like the lighting effect filter, right? But we're going to do more here, okay? Because, Steve, this is just very flat. It's very boring. We know we could change the color of this and do different things, but we want to give it more atmosphere because this is a kind of a dusty attic. So we want to add some variance to this as well. So hopefully that works for you. Wait for it. I have so many files open right now. Well, I have 3 of them open, but this blur just takes a second to render. Okay. Yes, exactly. Valentine Pierce. The blur gallery is sick. If you get a chance, check out the path blur. You could add as many path blurs as you want. So if you want somebody running, you can have each limb sort of move a different direction or like kind of blur out going a different direction. So again, that's path blur. Spin blurs for something like wheels. If you wanted to make a car, even though it's like, just a static photo, it's just parked and you want to make it look like it's moving, you'd use the spin blur for the wheels, path blur for the background, and then tilt shift for the whole scenery, if you will. All right. Fantastic. So that's the blur we're making. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into filter and I'm going to add, I'm going to use the clouds filter. I don't know if you've used clouds. So basically I can paint and kind of do some splotchy painting, but if I want kind of like a splotchy look, I want to use this cloud filter to give me the variance that I want in this shadow. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. Again, we want to add variance in here. In fact, what I'm going to do, I could do this a couple different ways, but I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and let's do this ray of light. Selecting that layer mask, going down into render. Remember, we've used these first tool. Let's go into clouds. It adds those clouds, right? We could see that's too intense. No, not so much. I usually just make it larger. That's what I do. Command 0 will allow me to see the get to the control points, but I'll kind of make it larger and get this to a point where I want it, kind of like that. Again, Dusty Attic. We have this clouds variance happening right now. Okay. Switching that up, it's going to render out that filter. Oh, this is the thing. That's a pretty, this is a very large image, and I have a pretty complex filter on it. So that's kind of what's happening. That's why it's taking a second. So honestly, I should probably make everything a little bit smaller. But this is actually a camera raw image. So camera raw really does a lot of magic, just so you know. Here's some DNG files. These are camera raw. We can see this camera raw right there as well. Get a chance shooting camera raw, I would. Just because you could add all those lighting effects with, because basically you have more lighting data than what's initially shown in your image. So let's wait for this, and I apologize for this rendering out. I'm going to see if actually if I double click on this image, if I'll open up camera raw. I might be trying to do too many things at once, but I would love to show you camera raw and some of those settings. So just give me a second. Michelle, you're right. Rendering is the ... dots in text image in text messaging. It's like wait ... Exactly. But you know what? Considering that this is not 3D, I mean, if we were dealing with 3D design, we would spend half our day rendering. We'd probably have ideally a dedicated rendering machine to do this work. And I apologize, this is taking so long. So we'll just switch it up in a second. This is really the only thing I'm going to do here, but we also need to add some color to this as well. All right, finally done. Okay, so here's camera raw, by the way. Here it is initially. You saw something like this. Camera raw, obviously, we have all this camera data to turn a daytime scene into a nighttime scene, right? So that's another example that I was working on, but this is camera raw data and all those controls. All right, so let's kind of come in here. Let's select this. Let's, again, change this. We can change this lighting into something like overlay or soft light. Soft light already kind of makes that splash in there nice and pretty well. But chances are I probably want to dive into my adjustment layers. So here I can just go simply with brightness and contrast. And rather than brightening everything up, which is what I'm doing right now, I'm going to turn this into a clipping mask. So that ray of light that I made, I want to brighten that up. Let's turn that on like so. And let's actually wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. There we go. I don't want to, I actually am not going to produce a clipping mask. What I did is I just made it its own separate layer because I didn't want it to just brighten up this white, brighten up the whole image. And you can see what it does. This is the clipping mask. Don't just brighten up what the bright pixels there, brighten up everything. And you can see it does the obvious right there. Okay? So there's our rays of light. We've done the blurs. We could start to adjust the depth of these colors is probably another thing I'd want to do because chances are this window, the light is going to be brighter here and it's going to slowly trail off. So for this layer mask, I want to kind of blend it out. But instead of adding to this layer mask, what I'd want to do is I'd actually want to add another layer group, and we'll just call this light intensity. And this is going to go in there, boop, just like that. Now, for this one, it's like applying 2 layer masks to it. Adding that layer mask, just going with, that's right, gradient, And now I can have that toned down, okay? So it's like, here's my shape of my light, and here's the amount that it trails off, right? And we can see it does the obvious. Cool? Hopefully you get the idea there. I could really have so much fun with this as well, because in this folder, I can add hue and saturation, just to give you an idea. Again, I won't play with this too much, but look at how much I could brighten this up. This could be another layer in here, an adjustment layer, and for this one we can like change the color or do whatever we want. You get the idea, right? As I start to adjust that. Cool. All right, Michelle Keller, thanks for hanging out. Right, so again, having this sort of flexibility, these adjustment layers, like just gives me endless possibilities. And then my next goal, by the way, is to bring in this guy. Oh yeah, I'm gonna make this scary. Here's our character. Yeah, this is gonna get intense. This is gonna get intense. Oh yeah. Are you ready for this? Layer mask. Boom. Oh man. Invert that. There we go. All right, so my next goal, by the way, is just to add this guy in here. I probably need to blur this out and do some more things and actually add some highlights right in here to the front of his body. I honestly don't have time for that. I'm gonna have to do that later. So that since that's gonna take longer, I'm not gonna sweat it too much, but typically what that means is I would probably paint on him the same way I did before by adding a layer with a clipping mask, selecting a color, hitting B for brush, and then painting that light on him. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And again, this is going to take longer, and honestly, this might not even look good. It needs to be blurred out because this edge, there needs to be a bounce of that color off of his body. So it wouldn't be this crisp edge either. All right, blur, Gaussian blur. Let me know if you have any questions. You saw something like this in your attic. You're scaring me. Anyways, it needs more work. I get it. There we go. That's a little better. That's a little better for what I'm going for. Wait for it. Adjust this color. I'm adjusting the color of that light on his face. There we go. Cool. Just the thing you need to see after watching Mindhunter. Oh man. I have not finished Mindhunter. Still need to watch it. Let me show you something else. You ready for this? Best thing we could do with any sort of lighting is to study from, of course, real light. I'm really tempted to finish this. Let's try to finish this right now. That's what I want. Something kind of like that. There we go. That's right. I'm going to be using the blur tool. I don't use this a lot, but I just want to blur out this back edge just a little. Making it a little softer on that side because, again, he's like a premonition. Is that what you call it? He's a ghost, basically. And now you get the idea. I'd want to adjust this some more. because I think the more subtle, the better, just so you know. But you get the idea. Cool. All right, so we've done light shafts. We've worked with 3D. We've done some neon effects as well. And then let's not forget about our very first image, which I don't even know what happened to. Our Daniela PSD right here as well, right? So we've done quite a bit. An apparition. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Apparition. I don't know what I said, but that is the correct word. Right? So having this. What would be really fun here is to just do even some... there's a lot of things I could do with this. Giving it a highlight along the edge. Does it cast a shadow onto her? Might be another thing I could think about. I'd probably want to study real shadows. I want to show you a piece that I'm working on, by the way. And it might be kind of large, but... Give me 1 second. Just so you can see how this is put into play. What I will also sometimes use is I will use actually Illustrator, right? Because what are we doing? We're doing shafts of light. And that's what's happening here. I've actually used Illustrator for some of these shafts of light. But you can see this piece, very complex. I'll probably talk about this later on as well. But there's this glow effect. And doesn't adding this lighting do a lot for this particular image? Look again. Here it is with it off, kind of boring, right? We want to put some lighting behind, turning that on. You can see how much of an impact that makes. If I twirl this down, you can start to see all these various little lighting effects. Okay, these were actually done in Illustrator. So let me unlock this folder. And wait 1 second for it to open. Here's lighting that was done in Illustrator. So at the end of the day, I would just have one asset, and I really do. I have a lot of these. You ask where I get most of my images. I get a lot of them from Adobe Stock. So I'll typically build up a library of these things that I know I use a lot. I'll go into miscellaneous, and right in here we have all my like color splashes and things. So it's like once you have a lighting effect built that you like, you could just use the bits and pieces from it any way you want. And that's what's done in here. And I know this isn't an Illustrator stream, but hey, it's still Adobe, right? So you can see each one of these. Taking a look at it, guess what? Oh, it's that easy. It's just a gradient. It's a radial gradient, okay? As we can see it right in here, how's that being applied? Let's disable the layer mask. Change that to normal. Cranking this up. This is what it looks like when I brought it in, right? What would we do in this case? You guessed it. Change the blend mode to lighten, which I did earlier, and then start painting and removing from that layer mask. So let's enable that layer mask to see what I painted, and obviously you have those shafts of light, right? And then tone it down some. All right, cool, cool. Same thing in here was done as like what I did in with the statues, right? So I had these statues, this one in particular, painting on the actual object because it's not about just drawing or having the light rays. It's about painting on those specific layers to get what you want. So right in here, this is where I'd come in and say, hey, you know what? Let's add a layer. And let's start painting with that gold color. Let's turn off what I did actually. But I'd start painting that light as it starts to hit some of these objects, right? Maybe it's gonna hit this bone right here. Painting like so. It's gonna hit this side, so that's gonna be super intense. Let's change the blend mode to maybe overlay. It might hit right here. You can see it's adding that splash of color from that light. I'm painting with light. Do that on the skull. Start to brighten that up as you can see. Cool? So that's all I'm doing right here. Coming in here, wherever that light's gonna hit, thinking in like 3D space, like where would that light hit? Yeah, it's going to hit right here. You get kind of intense right there, right? You can see how that I'm painting on that part, especially for these flowers as well. That light's going to be hitting one side of them, but not necessarily the other side. So painting on that side, zoop, right in here, adding those highlights, and it gives it that realism. And what's happening here is this is like a rim light. Anytime you can add these little details like a sort of like a rim light, it's just going to really make your artwork pop. And again, all I'm doing is painting right down here. We'll call it highlights. And this I'm painting with yellow, and it's set to overlay. Cool. You get the idea. Again, a lot of this is not difficult. It just takes time, right? Especially for this piece, it's pretty intense. It's got a lot going on. Right, there's a splash of color like so. Okay, I'm winding down to my last couple minutes. You can kind of see I'm even kind of repeating myself. Like this all starts to become like very similar, right? So painting with these on these layers with certain blend modes is what I'm doing, and then you start to stack them up. Sometimes I'm painting with color. Sometimes I'm actually using an adjustment layer, and then I'm sort of painting with that adjustment layer. So I'm just adding to that layer mask, or removing from that layer mask. And here, splash color. You get the idea. Light everywhere. It starts to make this pop. I'll do this really fast, right? We could have it over here and have a lot of fun with this, giving it more depth as I paint away, right? Cool. Let me know if you have questions. I'm kind of winding down. We can turn on my final. Right over here. There we have all that light shooting through there. Technically made in Illustrator, right? But I already showed you how to make it in Photoshop, right? We did one shaft of light here, and you can see that this version just has a lot more of that going on. So blend mode for the rim light is, let's turn this on. It's set to overlay, right? I'll usually switch between overlay, and if you want something softer, of course, soft light will also do it. But I've typically been painting with overlay. And like I said, I can actually see, I could do something like this. I could do an overall adjustment layer. So let's go into levels. And let's turn off some of these other objects. So levels, I'm gonna say, hey, you know what? Let's use levels to add those highlights. We'll crank that up, right? Either way, just we're gonna crank up that intensity. And by the way, I'm gonna turn that to, I'm gonna invert it and turn it to black. Now I can paint with white. Command B for brush. And I'm painting with that, painting with that levels. Right? Again, painting with that levels, I could see how that pops, right? Like so. Once I do that for a while, I can then adjust the brightness or contrast or whatever. Again, I'm doing this really fast just so you can see it work. Let's paint a lot of this really quickly. I'm adding all these splashes of color. That was way too intense what I did just right there. But once I've added all of that, right, here's the pop. I can always kind of scale that down or increase it. So that's the value of using adjustment layers. You could see my mess of things. You often end up using a combination. So that's what I have going on here. It's just, it gets messy, but that's life. So you get the idea. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to kind of wrap up right now. You could obviously see this piece with the lighting that I'm still working on, and all the other ones we worked on today as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any more questions, because I'm kind of wrapping up now. Any more questions? but I'm amazed what we were able to get to. Look at all this content. Stacked in order now as well. So I do these every week. Feel free to hit me up if you want to learn something specific. Today I was talking about lighting effects, and you can see all these different examples of these lighting effects from something from something pretty straightforward to getting like more and more complex, and of course we got pretty artistic with it as well. But the key thing is really just layer masks, using adjustment layers, using blend modes, and a combination of those to get what you want, as you can see right here. There we go with this one. Cool. Well, Kent, thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you and everyone for spending your time with me, and just to kind of click over everything that I talked about. Yep, covered it all. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. I will let you go. We have a daily creative challenge coming up right after this, so stick around. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful long weekend, at least if you're in the US. So thanks so much for watching, everyone.